Hey everyone, my name is Annabelle Spooner. I hope everyone's having a great day so far. So today I am going to be discussing a fourth grade standard. It's about the water cycle. So first, before we dive into the standards, learning target, anything like that, I want to ask a few questions to get our mind going and our inquiry going and our questions. Okay. So the first question is, what is the water cycle? Like what is not necessarily just the definition, but what can make up the water cycle? What are the different parts of the water cycle? Another question that you can think about for the next few seconds or so is, since it's a cycle, does it ever stop, or is it consistent? So those are just two or three different questions that I want you just to pause the video and think about before we even dive into the standard or the learning target or the model itself. So go ahead and pause the video, and I'm gonna give you just a few seconds and pause it and think about it. Okay, so y'all have had some time to think and answer those questions. So, to me, in my opinion, the water cycle is basically the cycle that water goes through, and it has three different stages. So, there is evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Now, there are more parts to it, which we'll talk about later, but you'll learn those in later grades. So, basically, for a fourth grade standard, it is S4E3 dot B. So, develop models to illustrate multiple pathways water may take during the water cycle. So, the different pathways are evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Like I said, this is just a fourth grade. This is the fourth grade standard. Now, there are other parts to the water cycle that we learned later, but this is just fourth grade. So, evaporation, condensation, precipitation. So, what are the three? Evaporation, precipitation, and condensation. Awesome. So now my learning target for this is I can create a model to demonstrate the water cycle, including, what are the three things? Evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the model. I have created a model of the water cycle, as you can see up at the top. So I've got my three different parts. There's condensation, precipitation, and evaporation. And you can see, it's kind of hard to see right there, but you can see the arrows and how they go. And this might answer the second question that I asked about, since it's a cycle, is it constantly going? Yes. I mean, the water is constantly moving through these three phases, these three parts of the cycle. So you've got condensation, precipitation, and evaporation. Now, before we get started on discussing the model and how it's going to be created, I want to talk about some of the things you may need for this. So some of the things I use were pipe cleaners. There's tissue paper. I use a lot of tissue paper, regular paper, and for students, instead of printing out labels for every student, they could use their handwriting and make it personable, and they can write out the water cycle, and they can write out the three different parts on a sheet of paper. My clouds, that's just paper. The raindrops, paper. Now down at the bottom, you can see that I used some different tissue paper. On the sides, I used tissue paper, and on the back, I used just regular construction paper. So there are a few things that I used in this to create it. Now, for the project, I would have multiple boxes. This is just a regular old, just storage box that I found. I'll have different types of boxes like this, shoe boxes. No student would have to bring their own supplies. So I would have the whole back table full of pipe cleaners, maybe cotton balls for the clouds, labels that they can just stick off, write on it, peel it off, and stick it where it needs to go. The only thing that they would really have to do is make sure that they put the label in the correct spot and that they show condensation is moving from evaporation and it's condensing into the clouds. They need to show that. They need to show that precipitation is whenever rain or snow or sleet or hail or anything is falling down to the ground. Now, down here at the bottom, this is kind of what I was talking about. So I did look up the sixth grade standard, and in sixth grade, this is not doing anything with fourth grade. This is sixth grade. So in sixth grade, students have to know precipitation, condensation, and evaporation. They have to know that, but then they also have to know about transpiration infiltration, groundwater, and runoff. So, as you can see at the bottom, I did kind of make my green area more hilly, and so that way students can remember and can connect some different things that they will learn later. So down here at the bottom, that can show runoff. That can show the precipitation running down into the water. And granted, I would not test my students on this because it is a higher standard. So I would never test them on it. It would just be something I would explain to them that they will learn later. So I'm not connecting prior knowledge. I'm connecting latter knowledge that they would learn later. So for my project, you can see the different things that I used. But I will have multiple different things that they can use, and even with them writing on their labels, that's personable. And before we even start making the model, students will be handed a sheet of paper and they will draw out the different parts of the water cycle. So that way I can check over it and we can make sure that before we start gluing, before we start putting everything together, that we have everything situated, everything the way it needs to be. Another thing that I did want to discuss is that hot glue guns. There's no way that I would let fourth graders use hot glue guns. But some of the things on my board, I did have to use a hot glue gun for. So I would definitely explain that to them first. I would explain that if they did use something, maybe tissue paper, for example, they might just need to make it thinner. And so that way it would stick on with the glue. So I'd make sure that I explained that to them first beforehand. So that way they weren't making, a big old sun that was this big and this thick to go on their presentation, because there's no way that would fit on the board. There's no way that the regular glue stick would stick on their board, right? So those are just a few things that I would discuss with them, because hot glue gun, fourth grade, safety issue in and of itself. I even burnt myself right here. I've got a blister on my finger. So no way we'd use that. But so those are just some of the things that I would have ready for them. I'd have glue sticks, scissors. We would talk about safety with scissors again. We discussed that. I'd have tissue paper, pipe cleaners, cotton balls, labels, paper, regular construction paper. And I just really want them to take this project and make it their own. I definitely want them to brainstorm and to think about the video that we were going to watch before making this, the quizzes game that we did before we would make this, and think about all that knowledge that they had just gained to help them with this summative project. And also, this would be my summative grade because it would be over the entire standard of the water cycle. So another way that you could do this, if you did not want to do it with one person, you could do it a group. You could do like 3 or 4 people working together on this project, and they could all present it together. You could use that as a grade, and you could also use the model itself as a grade, which is what I could do, or you could do. Another thing that I wanted to discuss is evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. So, as you can see in the model, condensation is whenever the water condenses into the clouds and it flows down, and in precipitation, it comes back around and it evaporates up through, the water evaporates to the sun, and then it keeps going, and it's a constant, continuous cycle that water goes through. One example of this would be maybe if you see a puddle outside at the beginning of the day, but then it gets hot, and so what happens? That water evaporates up into the sky because it's hot. It goes up to the sun, and then it comes over. It condenses into the clouds, and then whenever it rains, that water falls back down. And so that's just a continuous, constant cycle. So my learning target was I can create a model to demonstrate the water cycle, including, or the 3 things, evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. So this is my model. This is the way that I decided to represent the 3 different parts of the water cycle. And so that is it. This is my model. This is my model of the water cycle. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.